himself and the Weymouth High wrestling teams were very, very good. It's a miracle considering how many people he pulled out of wrestling rooms, telling them they were no longer wrestlers. Just Jedi mind tricks, and then they weren't wrestlers anymore. It's unbelievable that he could pull that off. Sorry. Our next four speakers actually have an important distinction. They were the members of the final team that Ed was a head coach in track and field in 1998. And I'm sure that they're going to talk about their New England Championship and all-state record-holding 4x800 meter team. And I'm sure of it because every time I see them, that's what they talk about. So please welcome Adam Carlo, Wayne Lewis, Brian Cronin, and Greg Zapati. Too big to be a runner. So, I'm Brian Cronin, and I'm going to share a personal story about Ed that I think speaks volumes for who he was as a coach and a mentor. So, one December night, and it's hard to believe, it's almost 20 years ago, I called Ed one evening at his home. So, you guys at work, home phones, and they were attached to the wall. So I called Ed at his home one evening, and when he picked up the phone, I said with tears still fresh in my eyes, "Ed, I have terrible news." And Ed, sounding alarmed, said, "Oh my God, Cronin, what is it?" Greg always did the best impression of Ed. We didn't feel like it would be, we knew that we had to slide it in there somewhere. So in response, so after Ed sounding alarmed, in response, I said, "Ed, here's my terrible news. Ed, I didn't make the varsity basketball team." So Ed was quiet for a second, I suspect because he needed a minute to stop laughing a little bit at what a 16-year-old's perspective of what terrible news is. So, but to his credit, Ed didn't validate my feelings, and over the next half hour plus, Ed didn't talk, he just listened. He didn't tell me what I should do, he just listened. So I told him that I thought I wanted to quit hoops, but I wasn't sure about it because my entire life up to this point, I had been a 6'3" basketball player. And I was afraid. I was afraid of being labeled a quitter. So at the end of my half an hour, Ed said, "Brian, I'm not going to tell you what you should do. You're a good runner right now, running cross and outdoor for us. But I believe I believe in you, and I believe that you can be a good runner if you run all 3 seasons for us. And if you work hard enough, maybe you'll even be able to run Division III or Division II. But I want you to think about it. Either way, I know you're going to do the right thing for you, and I respect your decision." After 2 weeks of hearing, "You can't and you won't," Ed told me, "You can, and I believe in you." And that's all I needed to hear. The next morning, I marched into the basketball coach's office and said, "I quit." And I suited up for indoor track that afternoon. 5 days later, I entered my first indoor race and won. Thank you. 3 months later, Greg, Wayne, Matt Callahan, and I competed at high school national championships. A year later, Greg, Wayne, Adam, and I repeated our appearance at high school national championships. 3 months after that, as Mike Miller will often tell you, yes, we live in the past. The 4 of us, in his last race as a head coach, won the 4x800 state championship, posted one of the top times in the nation that year, and set a state record that held for 8 years. Four years later, I was named mid-distance captain of not the Division III, not the Division II, but the Division I University of Massachusetts Minutemen. Today, I still run and compete. And when I say compete, I try to see the back of Greg Putnam's head from at least a mile away. I'm still very good. But that all started with Ed saying, "You can, and I believe in you." And in the 20 years since, I've recalled your words when I need it most. And I try to pay it back as often as I can by telling those that I love, lead, and influence, "You can, and I believe in you." So what's particularly special about you, Ed, is that my story is just one of hundreds of stories like this from kids in this town that you influenced over 6 decades of coaching, many of whom are here today. I'm going to be forever grateful to you for those 6 powerful words that you gave me that night 20 years ago. And you admire me. I admire you more than you'll ever know. One day, I hope to tell my 16-month-old daughter, who, like her father, can't sit down running around the hallways behind me, you can, and I believe in you. I'm going to hand it off. Thank you very much, Ed. It's so honored to be here. I'm speaking in the order of our relay, and I'm going to hand it off to Wayne Lewis.
On April 1st, 1996, Massachusetts received nearly 30 inches of snow in the midst of our sophomore track season. Ed Meehan knew that time away from the track was neither desirable nor beneficial as we sought to remain competitive in our final year of the Old Colony League. So after the roads had been sufficiently plowed, Ed called to advise that he'd be picking us up the next morning for practice. School remained closed and he wanted to make sure we got a chance to stretch our legs. So initially dismissing the call as a joke, sure enough, Ed made his way through South Weymouth the next morning and crammed 5 of us in for the short ride to Nantasket and a distance workout on the sand, the only place suitable amidst the snow. In the fall, Weymouth transitioned to the Bay State League for the first time and a chance to compete alongside rivals Newton North and Brookline. Our weekends quickly became occupied with invitational events. And while each of us excelled in individual events from the 600 meter to the 2 mile, it was Ed's keen insight to our individual talents that helped him prepare us for the upcoming state championship. Because he knew that our best shot to compete at that level that year would be through the 4x800 meter relay in Brookline with Jonathan Riley, a future Olympian. Despite a hard-fought race, we came up just short of the finish line and had to settle for 2nd place. Nevertheless, that defeat became a catalyst for further growth because Ed knew the strengths of our team and our weaknesses. And he spent the next year getting us ready for rematches with Brookline, including, as Brian mentioned, the national championship. On June 6, 1998, at the Norwell High School was the outdoor all-state meet. It was actually the last time the 4 of us were together. As Brian described, that was the last time that we ran and we competed and won the state championship and set a record. What he didn't tell you was it also was the night after the senior prom, and we did it on very little rest. When I reflect on our time with Ed, I'm reminded of this quote from Jeff Hollister. He was an Oregon track and field star with the famous coach Bill Bowerman. I thought about this quote and the legacy of mentorship that Ed's established in this town. Let me read the quote. Life thrusts you into a competitive environment. How do you prepare for the realities and the unknown?